If I was going to make a list of the holidays that I liked least, probably Valentine's Day would be right up there toward the top. And why is that? Well, I always have suspected that the greeting card companies actually were behind Valentine's Day. It's a stimulus package for sales of flowers, dinners, that sort of thing. That's fine. I mean, everybody needs a stimulus package these days. But the problem with it is that it's phony. It's not real. You know, I have this image that's associated with Valentine's Day. It's like this beautiful couple is walking along the beach, you know, and it's sunset and the waves are coming in and they're, you know, cuddled up together, and she's wearing about a $9 million designer dress. It's fluttering in the breeze just perfectly. And, you know, and he's going, oh, I love you so much, you know. And they get to dinner and he pulls out a diamond ring. You know, my baby really loves me. He's just given me a diamond ring. And if he gave her a bigger diamond ring, he would love her even more. So that's the part I really don't like. You know, it's like it confuses the illusion of reality, the illusion of love, with something that is the most magnificent and overwhelming and powerful in the universe. So, and it also compresses the whole thing into one day. So you've got one day to feel Valentine's Day or feel love, and then, you know, the next day, what do? It's gone. Doesn't work, you know. And then if you don't have a Valentine, if you don't have a sweetie, then you're left out. You know, you feel like the fat girl in 3rd grade, which is not very good. So anyway, so that's why I don't like Valentine's Day. But that isn't what we're talking about. Okay, so we're talking about today stories from the heart, writing from the heart, and living from the heart. So how is that different from Valentine's Day? Well, what is the heart? It's the center of you. It's the deepest, the truest, the purest part of you, the you, the real you. Your soul, I call it, the heart and the soul to me are the same. And the soul is the animating principle of your life. It's what makes you move. It's what makes you inhabit your body. It makes you do everything you do. And its nature is love. I'll talk about that a bit. The soul, I've been talking to the depth psychologists a lot. I led a book group for them last month. Anyway, so they talk about the psyche. And the psyche is basically the same thing as the soul. They talk about an acorn, that you're born with this acorn of being in you that is you. And the minute you come into the earth, bingo, it starts growing. And if you get any nurturing at all, that acorn will grow into a mighty oak. And the oak's branches will reach into the sky and touch the transcendent glory of the universe. And that oak will not only reach the sky, its roots will go down deep, and you'll feel the river of being that lies below ordinary experience. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in hearts and flowers. So the psyche automatically turns toward the numinous, which may have a strange resemblance to my book Numenon, because actually they have the same root. And the numinous means the sacred. So it's bliss. It's the transcendent experience. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about writing from the heart, stories from the heart, living from the heart. Big. It's something very big. Couldn't get that on a Hallmark card. So how do you get to the heart? Now, this is a very interesting thing, because here we have, I mean, we all know this. You know, everybody knows this in your heart. You know that what's there. You know what's possible as a human being. But how do you get there? You know, our minds are constructed. Why, I don't know. I didn't do it. But our minds are constructed so that every possible sort of filter comes in between us and the pure being that's outside of us, or us and the pure being that's inside of us. So when I was in graduate school in counseling, they gave us a 2-page handout, single-spaced 2-page handout of defense mechanisms. And these are things like deletion, distortion. So I used to know a whole bunch of them, but you know, there are things that your mind does to change the data that's coming in so that you get what you think is out there, not what's actually out there. So how do you get to that? How are we ever going to get to writing from the heart? How are we going to get to living from the heart and stories from the heart? How are we going to get to that? Well, saints spend their lifetimes piercing that veil of illusion, getting through the fog to the real thing. Saints do this. And it's pretty much the same all around the world. I'm taking a contemplative prayer class now at my church, and I also have a really long background of Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion. And if you read, St. John of the Cross, and you compare his ecstatic poetry to that of Mirabai, the famous Hindu woman saint, they sound the same. The names are different. I mean, there's different names for God, but they sound the same. So there's the same experience. So that's nice. So if a saint can do that, spending a lifetime, what's a civilian supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? How do we get to the heart? How do we get through the maze? Well, there's a lot of different ways, and people have their own ways. But I have a secret technique that I'm going to share with you today. My secret writing technique that I've just put into words. And I call it literature through disaster. I've done a lot of writing. I wrote a lot professionally. I wrote a lot academically. I wrote a lot writing letters. I wrote a lot. I was in writing groups for 11 years, a long time. And I've been working with an editor ever since then. So I've done a lot of writing. I never could finish anything. I could finish maybe a short story, but I couldn't finish a book. I mean, I couldn't even finish a little book like this, which is a kid's book. I couldn't finish any of it. So what happened? Well, literature through disaster. Back in 1993, I had something happen to me. And it was sort of like a bazooka being shot dead center into my heart. And it just destroyed my whole life and what I thought about everything and everybody that I knew. Not everybody that I knew, a lot of the people I knew. It was awful. It was disaster. It was a disaster. So 2 years after that, 1995, I kind of worked my way out of the doldrums and was going again, and I went to a meditation retreat. And at this meditation retreat, I did everything. I did all the meditations. I worked like crazy. I did all the exercises. I did, and I also contacted some of the people outside of the retreat that I had business with, that I needed to clear things up with, So I started that process. So when the thing was done, I went, "Whoa, I'm better. I'm great. This is like it never happened." And that wasn't even the beginning. When I got home, I had this huge transcendent experience. Hollywood special effects guys could not do this. I know about meditation experience. I know about that. But this was like, whoa, and I never thought it was going to happen to me. Actually, it's right in the author's note to Numenon. So if you want to look at that, it's right there. I talk about it more. So what happened when that huge event went away, disappeared, there was this book in my head. Literally, it wasn't this book. It was a book that's farther down the line. I had a whole series of books in my head. And I went downstairs and I wrote out this little, I just, and I gave it to Barry and I said, "What does this sound like? Does it sound like anything?" And he said, "Yeah, make it longer." So 275 pages later, I realized I had a book. But as I said, it wasn't this book. It was one farther down the line, and this was just a little something I wrote to get us there. So all of a sudden, I had the discipline to finish things. I was able to finish things, and I had the ideas to finish. So that's pretty cool. So that's literature through disaster. So. Now, was it finished? Was it finished? And I need to say, too, like when that experience happened, I had no idea that anything like that could happen to me, or pretty much happen to anybody. But anyway, so there it was. So life went on. I was working on the sequels to this. And then something else awful happened. So there was another disaster. And that was my brother died. That was in 2007. And he was 9 years younger than me. He was 54 years old when he died. He was one of the most handsome men I have ever seen. He had these gorgeous blue eyes, you know. And it was very sudden and very unexpected, and it hurt. It hurt a lot. And so I came home from the funeral, and you know, was chugging along. You know, it's like I looked okay on the outside, but I was chugging along. And I had all this stuff going on inside of me, like my whole life history with him, and all my family stuff, you know, everything. And so the same thing happened. I mean, it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't the same kind of an experience, but I had another transcendent experience that's written in the author's note to the angel, and I talk more about, you know, what it was that happened. And the same thing, you know, that dissipates. I mean, I got to feel being an angel. It was, I'll tell you, I was sleeping, and this yellow light, I could see in my dreams, this yellow light was like above me, and it was just radiating goodness and kindness and wonderfulness, you know, everything good, you know, and then it just slowly lowered down on top of me. And I got to feel what it felt like to be like that, you know, and it was really good. It was really, really nice. I recommend it, you know, and then it just slowly dissipated in the day, and that, you know, I was back to my old self, you know, but the grief was gone. But what was there was this book, The Angel. The Angel and the Brown-Eyed Boy. So, and the angel, that whatever that was that came to me, I don't know what it was. You know, is the angel in here, except she's not really an angel, she's an extra-terrestrial. So it's sci-fi. And anyway, so that's, I finished this book. I wrote this book in, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, and that's just the first part. You know, you have to go through editing and you do all this stuff. It takes a really long time. It's painful. You know, but I was done writing this, and the sequel was there in my head, so I just wrote it down, you know, and then the sequel to that was there, so I wrote that down, you know, and so I was hoping to have them ready to bring to you. The next one is Lady Grace, and the one after that is called Sam and Emily, and that's a romance, and it's the first romance I have written. So, one of the guys working on the editing of it said that it's in good taste. So it is in good taste, but it is spicy. So anyway, so I'd like to read you some of The Angel. This is the beginning of The Angel. Barry loves this. My husband just really loves this. So I hope you like it. I hope you like it too. When the girl appeared on, okay, this is the first chapter. This is, you know, I should tell you a little bit more about this series before we jump into it. Okay, I got the ideas when my brother had just died, and I was in this very sad, hurt time. And so the name of the series is Tales from Earth's End, and it's every single book. They're literally at the end of the earth. I mean, it's like they're ramped one more step and they're off the edge, you know. So this one, The Angel and the Brown-Eyed Boy, it takes place the night before, the day before the end of the earth. There's going to be a nuclear holocaust, and everything's going to be gone on the earth. So that's where they are. You know, it's a little tense. So the ensemble that I've got going in it is sort of trying to see how they can survive, you know, the next day. So they're busy. And into the middle of all this happens. When the girl appeared on the sidewalk, the edges of her body and clothing were fuzzy, as though all of her hadn't arrived. She looked up and down the street the way a person would if she'd lost her way. Her hair was frizzed and matted. She was thin and had a dirty face and wore a scratchy coat that was far too big. Its sleeves were little rounded capes, and her arms stuck out of them like chopsticks protruding from a napkin. The coat slipped off her shoulders, first on one side and then on the other. She hitched it up and she kept walking. And when she walked, the coat opened to reveal her feet and lower legs. Her thin socks, trimmed with grayed lace, were pulled up to make a ruffle below her knees. Pink satin laces held up the socks, their X's snaking up her skins from the shoes. She looked pretty much like everyone she saw, except for her shoes. Long pink ballet slippers stuck out from underneath her coat, as improbable as roses sprouting from the cement. Humans passed, but no one stopped or said anything to her. A paper blew against her leg. More dirty papers blew and piled up everywhere. Streaked and grimy buildings rose near her. Writing in different colors covered their walls. She looked carefully but couldn't make out the words. She learned to read and write English, but those words mystified her. The girl realized that her people were right. They had put her where no one would notice her. Now she needed to tell them that she had arrived. She raised one foot, turning it gracefully and resting it easily on the other knee. She flicked the shoe with her finger, listening, and a trill of clear notes deep within her brought the hint of a smile. She held the coat closed and stood still. She was where she was supposed to be. It had begun. She fingered the piece of paper in her pocket, her map, and beneath it in the pocket's depths was the notebook. What was written on it would get her where she needed to go, and she had all she needed. Eliana choked when a very large carrier passed, spewing a foul odor. The carrier floated above the hard surface where the vehicles moved. Her teachers had told her about that floating. Though she couldn't see it, a force lived under the machines that made them go, and it would kill her if she touched it. She didn't know what kill meant. Kill did not exist in her world. Her mother had explained that she would be like a dead pet, and she had seen dead pets, motionless husks. A man with a round stomach and a gray hat walked out of an opening in the ground with many others. His coat was the same scratchy stuff as hers, but it was buttoned up and looked new. He looked new. His face was ruddy and clean. The trill of notes sounded in her mind once again. He was the one! She stood in front of him to make him stop. She hoped that he could comprehend her speech. "Will you help me?" she said, working to form the strange words. George bent down to look at her, a homeless waif, dirty and lost. She didn't smell, thank God. And then he saw her shoes. "You take ballet?" "My daughter takes ballet. Those are point shoes. You shouldn't be walking in those. They're just for dancing." "Dance," she said with a tiny smile. She looked beautiful when she smiled. Something about her touched him. He pulled a $5 bill out of his wallet. He never gave money to street people, but this was a new one, a bedraggled ballet dancer out begging. Probably her mother got the shoes in a thrift store. And then he looked at her again and he knew she didn't have a mother. Not on this earth, anyway. "Take this," he said, handing her the bill. He wanted to get rid of her. The first race was starting soon. He had bets to place. She looked at what he'd given her as though she'd never seen a fiver before, and then pointed to the image of the Lincoln Memorial on the bill and whispered, "Temple." He tossed her another $5. She had a good act, if it was an act. Yet everything about her told him that it wasn't an act. She was so foreign that he couldn't even comprehend how foreign she was. But she was wonderful, too. Standing next to her, he felt buoyant, like the bank wasn't going to take a house back, and like life was great. He felt happy. It had been so long since he had felt that way, he almost didn't recognize the feeling. His chest opened up and a smile popped onto his face. He wanted to help her, maybe take her to a shelter or get her a job. She looked at the money and tried to give it back. "It's for food," he pointed to his mouth. She didn't know what food was either. He could see. She wanted him to do something. He looked around frantically. The races were about to start. He couldn't be hanging around with some little girl. He had bets to place and his house to save. You could imagine the horses parading in the paddock area, ready to take out onto the track. Overhead, flags would be flapping and all the guys would be there and they'd drink beer for an entire afternoon. Life would be what it should be. "Sayonara, ballet princess, I gotta go." He tried to step around her, but he couldn't. "I gotta go," she whispered without moving. Something about her was breathtaking. "Where do you want to go?" "School." She looked at him with huge, solemn eyes. They were gray, with silver flecks that made them gleam. He stared at her, unable to look away. "Well, go. I'm not stopping you." "Where is school?" She pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket. The name and address of a high school was written on it, the Hermitage Academy. Everyone had heard of it. Kid actors and dancers and artists went there. Dance school, she said, looking at him hopefully. He got it. Some of those artist kids looked like her. He'd seen them on ads for plays like Grunge and Road Dirt. Maybe she fell out of Mommy's roles and ended up down here. But she wasn't rich, and she hadn't fallen off anything. His head said she was just a funny little girl, and the rest of him said she was from outer space. The school's uptown, a long way. He tried to grab the paper and draw a map, but she pulled away, alarmed. Honey, I gotta go. I got people waiting. Hail one of those cabs, the yellow cars. Wave one down and go to school. Use the money I gave you. Here's some more. Gave her a 20, and then a demonstration of waving down a cab. None of them stopped for him. They stopped for her. She walked out into the traffic, looking into the eyes of a cabbie. Horns screamed and cars shrieked as their braking systems locked. The taxi hovered there, rocking back and forth. What's the matter with you? You crazy? The driver bellowed. George scooped her into the cab and sat next to her. The Hermitage Academy, that art school in Manhattan, take us there. His hand shook when he placed his arm around her shoulder. Such a close call. He had to protect her. Light radiated from her, light and something good. She was here to do something important. He had to get her to the school, and then he could play the ponies. The school looked like a prison, a stone-fronted hulk rimmed by chain-link fencing with rolls of razor wire on top. He saw it and cringed. She wouldn't try and climb the fence, would she? The wire would cut her. Did she know that? He looked at her. She looked at it, eyes wide. School? Yes, that's right. Right at the address you showed me. Now go. I'm not taking you any farther. And she fumbled with the door handle. Geez, do I have to do everything? He got out and walked around the car, then opened the door. He took her hand and set her on the curb. Her hand was tiny as a little elf's, white and cold. You button up that coat. Just walk across the street to the guard station. And listen, if you get any trouble, call me. My name is George Hempstead. And he pulled a business card out of his pocket and gave it to her. What's your name, sweetheart? Eliana. I am Eliana. She took his card and looked at him solemnly. She put the card in her pocket and then dug deeper and pulled out a notebook. And when she opened it, light blasted from the pages. His eyes bulged. The page looked as though the words were cutouts with a 1,000,000-watt bulb behind them. And that was wild enough, but he couldn't believe what the page said. He'd been working the numbers all week, and he knew every horse and its odds. You even got their weights down. Where did you get this? They are wins. How do you know that? This for you. You helped me. He pointed out a pen and pad from his jacket and scribbled what was on the page. How could anyone not believe tips that came from magical letters in a fairy's notebook? Just the same, he asked her, are you sure these are winners? They are always right. And they were right. Every horse on the list won by what she said it would, and he won all day. He maxed out his credit cards. He won and won. He bet the house if he could. He had to go through security when he left with his bags of money. They frisked him and they questioned him. They had a file open on the desk, and he started when he saw his picture. They had a file on him. But he figured they kept files on everyone. The feds were always watching. A low-bet regular, it said under his photo. He was insulted. Hey, guys, a little angel came to earth and sat on my shoulder. They let him go. There was no reason to hold him. And when he went back to school and found that little girl, he'd come back. Tomorrow, they'd change the caption on his file to all-time winner. He stopped short. The girl. He had to get Eliana. He was nothing without her. That's the first chapter.